Matthew.
That's right. It's in a pretty optimistic timetable, in fact, to get that done, given the way most free trade negotiations seem to go. But leaders at that G8 summit pretty happy at least to get those formal talks launched yesterday on Monday. But even getting this far hasn't been without obstacles, as Mark Edwards reports.
It's been called the biggest bilateral free trade deal in history. Convening at the G8 summit, the US and the EU launched negotiations aimed to boost exports with lower tariffs and the sweeping away of regulatory barriers to trade. According to British Prime Minister David Cameron, the deal could be worth as much as 120 billion euros to the EU, 95 billion euros to the US, and 100 billion euros to the rest of the world.
And there's no better way than by launching these negotiations on a landmark deal between the European Union and the United States of America.
However, negotiations around the historic deal have been overshadowed by a row over perceived French protectionism. France has demanded its film industry be shielded from Hollywood, a request which left European Commission President Manuel Barroso frustrated.
Some say they belong to the left, but in fact they are culturally extremely reactionary.
Paris's refusal to budge may have uncertain consequences. The US could retaliate by refusing to lift trade barriers in other sectors. The US president, however, is more hopeful.
There are going to be sensitivities on both sides. There are going to be politics on both sides. But if we can look beyond the narrow concerns to stay focused on the big picture, the economic and strategic importance of this partnership.
First round talks are set for July the 8th in Washington, and the aim is to clinch a deal by the end of 2014.
Well, on the agenda today, tax and transparency issues. Our international correspondent Douglas Herbert is there for France 24.
Today is going to be devoted to tax and transparency issues, and notably David Cameron's agenda of cracking down on tax havens. G8 countries account for 2/3 of the world economy and almost half of the tax haven money across the planet, $8 trillion. He wants both companies to come clean, big multinationals, on who their owners really are. And he also wants to go after tax cheats, tax dodgers, and tax evaders, who he says cost governments around the world hundreds of billions of dollars in lost revenues every year. It's going to be tough talk. We've heard it before at past summits. And while they may not reach agreement at this one, they at least hope to lay the groundwork for making things a lot clearer and getting their own G8 house in order at long last.
Yeah, Doug Herbert there in Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, a bit of a different story for Europe and China, because trade disputes have been escalating in recent weeks, haven't they?
They have. We had Europe imposing tariffs on Chinese solar panel manufacturers. They didn't like that. They suddenly said that European wine was in frame for them. Perhaps they would impose their own sanctions. And really, French wine producers are really concerned about that, because they make up the bulk, really, over 70%, as you can see from this figure, of the total of 537 million euros of wine exports come from France. Well, wine producers have been gathering in Bordeaux for the annual Vinexpo event. And, well, not surprisingly, they're hoping that a trade war between Europe and China can be avoided. Let's take a listen.
It's not in the interest of governments to enter a trade war. That's why I think we can count on our respective governments and our diplomats to find a compromise that satisfies all parties.
Living in France, I'm surprised there's any left to export, to be honest. What about the markets? How are they looking today?
Well, in Asia, investors have been a bit concerned about these fears we keep hearing about, that perhaps when we hear from the Federal Reserve on Wednesday, they might be tapering their boosting for the economy. The Shanghai Composite, though, has just managed to start making a few gains, as you can see there. Meanwhile, Stuart, just tell you that shareholders in the French luxury and sportswear group PPR will be voting on a name change this Tuesday. Now, this is the group that owns brands including Gucci, Stella McCartney and Puma, and the name change is planned to go to Kering, they're going to call it. That's with a K. Now, they'll also be voting on splitting off the French retailer FNAC. Now, this is all because they want to really focus in on luxury and sportswear, and FNAC, which sells technology and things like that, doesn't really fit in that picture anymore.
OK, now yesterday, if you were with us, Matthew wasn't here. He was at the Paris Air Show, enjoying the weather. Bad day weather-wise, wasn't it? It's all your fault. Good day for Airbus, though.
Good day for Airbus. I was getting soaked, but Airbus still having a good day. Now, of course, they went into the week feeling confident after that successful maiden flight of the A350. Now, it was these planes, the A380, that they sold a fair number of on Monday. 20 of them, in fact, bought, or provisional order at least, by the financing group Doric, and that enabled them to make 14 billion euros worth of orders on day one. Boeing didn't want to be outdone, but it was a bit behind, 4.5 billion euros. And an hour from now, we'll be live in Le Bourget talking to our colleague Marcus Carlson.
And as you were talking there, Matthew, we were just hearing actually EasyJet saying they're going to buy 135 Airbus A320 planes for almost 12 billion. So I'm sure you'll have more on that in an hour's time. Good timing. Thank you very much. Web news now starts with the protests in Brazil over the weekend, which have now mushroomed into what we've seen over the last few hours. Here it is for you.